Welcome back, Pam. Now, I say welcome back because I'm going to confess to everyone straight away that I made an almighty schoolgirl error last time. We have actually had this conversation before. We had a wonderful chat and we got to the end and I discovered that I hadn't hit the record button. So severe embarrassment. Anyway, all was not lost
Easily
because,
done.
sorry?
Easily done.
Easily done. Thank you very much for that. Anyway, all was not lost because I think we discovered how similar our outlook on the world actually is. Pam's a well-known astrologer. I've been a serial entrepreneur and an athlete. And we've both been seekers of truth in many ways, not just the world around us, but also in our own lives in terms of how who are we really and how powerful we are as creators of our own existence. We've both come from a corporate background, and I think for different reasons have had to be very self-reliant. Hence the sort of being prepared to try things and to experiment with versions of practical spirituality, with different aspects of manifestation, simply to deal with the trials and tribulations and to up our game. And we've both concluded really that change happens from the inside out. You've talked about that in many of your videos, and I've just written a book which is essentially on that very theme. So, for this rerun of our discussion, Pam came up with the title, which I think is very apt, which is Manifesting the Unmanifest. So, that's really what we're about tonight. And so, what is it that we might want to manifest? Well, good health, long life, loving relationships, abundance, our vocation, being the master of our art or our sport or anything we choose. Those are all things that most of us would want to manifest in our lives. So I thought we'd break down the discussion into a few subject areas, discuss generally, give some examples as to what we've experienced in our lives, perhaps, and then throw out the gauntlet to people that are watching and say, look, here are some things we challenge you to try. So the first subject really is that the foundation of manifestation is thought. And my take on it is that thought has energy. So it has a cause and effect relationship with our biology and the world around us. And it's super powerful. So we actually have to be terribly careful what we think. But often the problem is we don't know what we think until the proverbial hits the fan. And then things haven't gone so well, and we start to think, well, what actually went wrong there? Or we have repeating patterns in our life, relationships that keep repeating a certain outcome, jobs, and so on. So I think those are opportunities to actually look at our programmed thoughts and to start to unpick what we believe about ourselves that isn't true, and then reframe them into something that can become the basis of manifestation. Because if we don't know what we think, we can't fine tune our thoughts and project it. And that's where manifestation starts. So, what's your feel on that, Pam?
Yeah, it's a really interesting, Fiona. I've seen a lot of research now, quantitative research, that says 95% of our thoughts are exactly the same as the day before, and the day before, and the day before, and the day before. So we run constantly on unconscious thoughts that are, almost identical to weeks and months and years of the same thinking. So no wonder our lives don't change very much and our patterns don't change very much if that's the case. And thought, everything begins with a thought. If you think of the architect, he has a thought about a house he wants to build, and then he commits it to 2D, to paper, and then it becomes 3D bricks and mortar. So everything begins with a thought. As a wise person says, thought becomes things. But thoughts are electrical impulses, and they then produce an emotion. You can't really have a thought without an emotion. And the emotions are magnetic waves, and they are actually the more powerful of the two. If you're thinking about manifestation, the emotion is much more potent than the thought, but you can only get the emotion once you've had the thought. And then, you get in this kind of biofeedback loop. But the feeling, if you like, is the stronger of the two, the more potent of the two. And it is the feeling that reaches out into the plasma, if you like, into the quantum soup, which has quantum intelligence, and starts to form a reality that then bounces back to you. And so it is mastering not only our thinking. That's why I so often suggest to friends and clients, etc., stick post-it notes all over the house, especially if you've been through some trauma or breakup or whatever, because you can so often go, oh, I'm always a loser, I'll never, blah, 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 blah. So if you stick post-it notes all over the house, what are you thinking about right now? Check in with your thinking every 5-10 minutes. And you almost have to become a thought policeman to catch those unconscious, negative, unhelpful runs of thought. But having done that, the more potent side is actually the emotion, because that's the most magnetic side, if you like.
Yeah, I want to talk about a little bit later on the whole process of manifestation. What are the component parts of it? Because I agree with you. You have the thought, then you have to energize the thought, and so the emotion is the energy that sends it out there. And then there are other things.
Emotion. Yeah,
Yes,
emotion.
emotion. Thank you. That is perfect. And then there are other aspects that fit into that whole chain of events that has to happen. And for me, it's been really helpful to understand what are the components. So I don't want to steal our thunder just yet on that, because that is absolutely key, and that's where I want to lead to. But let's stick with the unraveling of unwanted programmed thoughts for a moment. Um, Now, I can find an example in my life. This is a small example, but it was significant. I did a lot of broadcast when I was in the financial sector. I became a spokesperson, and did an awful lot of TV, radio, and all the rest of it. And obviously, when you go onto a live show, that is actually quite daunting. And I was sitting there on one occasion, ready on the side of the set of the mainstream lunchtime news program in the UK, waiting to be wheeled on for my segment, absolutely terrified. And I'd done all the prep that I could. I'd sort of given them the questions they should ask me on the subject. I'd given them my answers. It wasn't my strong suit. So I was thinking, Christ, I hope they stick to the thing, because otherwise I'm going to be scuppered. Um, and I really didn't like this sort of feeling of nerves and wanting to be anywhere but where I was in that moment, when I actually knew I sort of enjoyed the actual moment of it, the interview itself. And I had this epiphany seconds before I was going on, that the reason I had these nerves was that I was worried about my own performance, about letting myself down and letting my team down, instead of thinking, why am I here? I may not consider myself an expert, but I'm here because I know more than the people watching the program by and large. So my job is to empower the audience, not worry about my own performance. That was a massive reframing, and it helped me with talks I gave that moment onwards and everything else I did. But I had to keep remembering that, because old habits die hard. So you have to actually keep practicing and keep remembering. So that was a very important exercise in reframing for me. Is there anything that you can think of in your experience?
Well, that's, it's really interesting you say that, because for 20 years I taught senior management how to make more persuasive business presentations. And one of the worst things they did that brought on so many nerves and made them speak quickly and stutter and do a lot of and reduce their seniority and reduce their credibility was thinking about themselves, their own nerves, and being in the spotlight. And I just said, you're just a messenger. Just forget you're just a messenger, and imagine you're sharing something really important with a good group of friends, and what's important is sharing that and benefiting them. And so that really worked well to reframe that and turn, and often you could jump someone's seniority by 5 or even 10 years in a few days, just taking the heat off, and it takes the pressure off you, oddly. And before I do any work, before I sit down to work on a project or do any writing or film a video or whatever I'm doing, I always just say, whatever is for the highest good, let it come through me. And then it seems to flow better, because with a Virgo midheaven, boy, can I stress. Boy, can I make a mountain out of a molehill. But if I set the intention of whatever is for the highest good, in a way it starts to take the pressure off me and just allow the information to flow to the audience, which is of greatest benefit to them.
Yeah. Now I want to go back and pick up something else you mentioned about becoming your own thought police. I like the idea of a little Pinocchio sitting on your shoulder, sort of narrating your life for you. And I think one of the ways that we can start to unpick the behaviors, the program behaviors that we have, which go back to the program beliefs, which go back to the program thoughts, is to actually observe our behavior in different situations and narrate it, to actually try and sort of observe and have this dialogue with ourselves in that moment, so we can actually try and understand, am I responding in this way because it's appropriate, because it's a truthful reflection of the situation, or is this just because I've always done it this way? So I think that is actually quite a handy way of starting to unpick things.
Yeah, and I so often say, stay on your eagle's perch. Be the observer, and it's something that's actually very yogic. They teach that as part of yoga philosophy. But the more you can stay on your eagle's perch, you stay out of the kind of noise and hubbub of the world, but you start to very much become an observer of your own behavior, your own patterns, etc. And that is a really calm, still place to be. And I'd recommend that all through your life, really, because it
So
gives you a sense of center and controlling your life again from the inside out rather than the outside in. And you can make many astute observations if you stay on that eagle's perch.
yeah, I use the sitting in the theatre and watching the play on the stage.
Yeah,
So
similar.
I think what we throw out to our viewers here is that this is where to start, perhaps, that this is something you can start to create a habit of doing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, totally. And also say to yourself, if you observe this, is this for my highest good? Is this of benefit to me? Or is this in any way lowering my frequency or taking me back to old memories or whatever? And if it is, then there's certain techniques to release those, to stop that repeating pattern, whether it's Ho'oponopono, whether it's tapping, emotional freedom technique. There are lots of tricks you can use to release that energy, but it's being the observer first of all. That's the first step before you can decide what to do about it.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something in there, which is slightly off piece, but actually really important. In my years in business, there were a number of situations that were really big, sort of big numbers, and potentially, I could have felt very aggrieved because one or two things that happened felt like gross betrayals of my staff, and actually, cost me dear financially at the time. And, what I realized is that there are very few really bad people out there. Most people are trying to do the best from where they see it. And so that means really there's no such thing as the truth in those situations. We all have our perception as to what went on and what we contributed to it. And I think for me, in those quite extreme situations, what was really important was to understand that, and to therefore not blame and not have a grudge. And that enabled me, for my own selfish reasons, to carry forward. To not carry forward the negativity, because when you carry forward any form of negativity, especially from conflict, it slows you down, it weighs on you, it actually in the end will probably contribute to ill health. So in the first instance, you have to find a way of neutralizing those situations so you don't carry the emotion. That then sets up also a neutral space where you're less likely to have repeating experiences. So I think that was something that was very important for me in business.
Yeah, because as soon as you're into those negative emotions or feeling betrayed or aggrieved or whatever, you are setting up the probability that you will experience more of those type of events in your life, because the universe is just a mirror to whatever you're feeling. And so you have to rise above that, because they're all low frequency energies. You have to rise above that and get to a state of acceptance. And I've had some massive betrayals in my life, which I won't go into now, but it could, it's so often they were actually tied back to past life experiences, and the dance goes on. That dance is playing out. And so once I achieved acceptance, I could just let it go. And it no longer affected my energy field. I could just let it go and come back to calm and peace and joy and gratitude. And actually, I've turned situations around from a sort of extreme financial loss to a lot of success simply by allowing them to go. Because otherwise, they're only affecting you. The other party probably couldn't care less. So it's only you who are suffering and continuing the probability of attracting more of those types of experience. So we've got to become masters of our energy as we move forwards. It's a
Yes, it's
real
good.
passion of mine.
Well, me too. And, it's why I called my book The Ultimate Relationship, the one with yourself, because it all comes back to us. Only you can change you. So it's about trying to find out how we do that, how trying to, as you say, master our energy and basically be in charge of ourselves and our life.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's what
I
it's
mean, the
about.
masters, some of the ascended masters and the highly evolved people would say, there is only you here.
Mm.
Now, that's really hard to get your head around. But what they say is there is only you here, and you are creating your entire universe in a hologram around you with your own feelings and emotions. Now, I actually find that quite hard to get my head around because, other people seem very real. But nevertheless, that's what higher beings do say.
Yeah.
So, and
Well,
in that case, we've really got to get a grip because there's only us here.
yeah, well, that all those sort of quantum ideas, you sort of get the gist of, but you can never really get your head around it because it's outside of our dimensionality. It's too big. But yes, I mean, absolutely. Right. So what next? Yeah, I want to talk about using the power of thought to support our health and to youth. So this is the idea that our cellular structure is intelligent and we can communicate with it. And obviously, this is proven in science. And if you think of the most extreme examples, I would say the placebo effect is one, and spontaneous remission is another. So everyone knows what the placebo effect is. Spontaneous remission, which is known in science, is where somebody who may have a whole load of terminal conditions, be out of choices with medical treatment, be expected to pass away anytime in that moment, and all of a sudden makes the most dramatic recovery, even almost instantly or overnight or within a few days. And so I think that is the ultimate um, explanation, the ultimate idea, the ultimate illustration of how we can be in charge of our biology. Now, I don't think we can all do that if we are not in a life and death situation and we're not on the spot and we have to make a massive, massive decision. But we do have a massive amount more control over our biology than we're led to believe or that we've experienced necessarily. So, what would your take on that be,
Yeah,
Pam?
I mean, two responses to that. Firstly, I have followed the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza for many years, and I've attended about 14 of his workshops internationally, his advanced workshops. I have witnessed so many miracles in my life from people who stand up from wheelchairs, from genetic conditions, from terminal cancer, etc. And there have been many, many very dramatic examples. I remember, and you can follow these on Dr. Joe Dispenza's student testimonials on YouTube. Go and check the regular, ordinary people who often were in extreme situations, which is why they started to follow his work, because the doctor said we can't do anything else to help you. And I remember one particular chap. He was a young helicopter pilot called Miles, and he had 50 tumors, and he'd had a lot of chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and doctor said nothing else we can do. And yes, he'd practiced the meditations for some months, but he went on an advanced week's workshop. And of course, you've got the benefit of the group energy. And by the end of the week, every tumor had gone.
Wow.
Every tumor had gone. So it's all about, again, energy and frequency, taking us back to the blueprint. And the second thing I would say, and I was talking about this yesterday, for instance, if you look at the work of Masaru Emoto, and I'm sure everyone's familiar with it, he asked people to send specific, not thoughts, but emotions to water samples. Love, joy, gratitude, hate, anger, whatever it was. And then the water samples were frozen and the subsequent crystals were photographed. And where the emotions were positive, they were exquisite symmetrical crystals. Where they were negative, they were ugly and distorted. And so if our body is only over 70% water, we are affecting every cell in our body by our ongoing rumination and repeated thought circles, if you like. So that is such a clear demonstration of consciousness affects matter.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
we
sorry.
know now that water holds memory. There's so much research on this to have validated Emoto's work. And so that is so clear and simple. So we've got to get a grip on staying positive in our lives, whatever the outside. We are here to have a life of magnificence. And we have to find joy in every day, whatever is coming out of the television set. We have to turn that around to say, I am in charge. I am a master of my destiny, of my thinking and my emotion, because I can see what happens to the water crystals and I'm made up of water. So I'm friggin' nuts if I don't use that as a
Yeah,
demonstration, and
yeah.
take myself back to good health. So those are the two answers I'd give to that.
Yeah, I mean, so many things to talk about. My take on the whole spontaneous remission thing is that in that moment of life or death decision, the person is somehow able to get into a state of 100% balance. When you're in balance, you cannot have dis-ease. And in that state of balance, the immune system gets boosted to such an extent that it sees the disease off. And I think
Yeah, I
that's,
think that's part of it, but I also think, those experiences I had, there was so much love in the room.
yes,
It was palpable. There was so much
yeah,
love. And if you've got that much love from a large group of people, that by definition has to be high frequency, that's what creates the shift, is
yeah.
the
Well,
love.
I was going to say, of course, then you have the amplification of coherent energy, love, thought, compassion, etc. And but the other thing I wanted to say is that we can experience miracles in our own lives in terms of our health in small ways. Um, I have experienced this myself a number of occasions just out of necessity, because having done sport all my life and having had horses, I have had a lot of injuries. And I've never been able to press the pause button on my life. So I've always had to try and fix me. And that's also been part of my fascination with how do I manage my own healing. And knowing that thought has energy, I thought, right, I can apply that to my body. So I started with tiny little sort of cuts, bruises, bangs, scrapes, where I would visualize either the other hand, perfect, the skin, look at it, superimpose it over the wound, or imagine an army of little people knitting it together, or somebody suctioning the fluid that's gathering out. And I would just, do little things like that. Now, I had also done years of meditation, and so I was able to trigger in the moment a very balanced state, which you learn to do through meditation, because the balance amplifies the power. And then when I had a couple of crises, like amputating a finger and a horse snagging an artery in his knee at a competition, I was able somehow, beyond my wildest expectations, to have this incredible moment of focus where I was able to clot the blood, stop the bleeding. And in the case of the amputation, I had an hour's journey to get to hospital, holding the end of my finger separately to stop
Oh,
it bleeding and to anesthetize it and to sterilize it. And it healed completely perfectly, fully functioning, and was, amazing to the medical profession. So actually, I think you start somewhere. And so the gauntlet I would throw down to people watching is use this exercise of little cuts, scrapes, bangs, small things, and get some positive feedback. It builds your confidence, and then you can actually tackle some of the bigger things.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's very impressive. And yes, absolutely, totally. And if you think that our solidity is an illusion, that our if someone flew through you with a camera taking photographs all the time, there'd be nothing on the film at the other end, because we are 0 point, and I think there's 6 or 7 zeros, 1% matter. We are simply vibrating energy. And so, therefore, it comes down, as you mentioned before, Fiona, to coherence. The more you can achieve coherence in your energy, the more that healing will happen in an accelerated way. And I think that's the real trick. And the focus does it. That incredible focus really brings in kind of armies of, I don't want to go too far with this, but other helpers to
Divine
help that.
intervention.
Yeah, yeah, yes, I do to a large extent. Come on down, guys. I'm
Yeah,
in
me
trouble.
too. Pile in.
Mm.
Right now,
So
yeah, sorry. Sorry, you didn't
No,
finish.
no, that's the point really. So I think realizing we are vibrating energy rather than this illusion of solidity helps, but the total focus and really breathing to make sure that you are in coherence, so that your heart and brain are coming into a very steady coherence, will boost your whole immune system as well.
Yeah. Now, I also want to just mention the sort of whole prevention thing. Prevention is far, easier than cure. And I know that you're big on affirmations, as I am. So every day in the morning, I have various affirmations for different things. But when it comes to my health, I've been saying for years, my biology is 100% balanced. My chemistry is 100% balanced. My physics is 100% balanced. My subtle body is 100% balanced. And so that is my sort of affirmation for prevention, which is, a daily occurrence. And so I think that, you can't necessarily quantify how much good health comes from that. But affirmations are the most amazing launching pad for your intentions and to manifest what you want in your reality.
Yeah, and feeling strong. I get younger, stronger, healthier every day.
Yes.
I mean, my health is better now probably than it's been since my early 20s.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm really living that day by day, and saying those affirmations through the day and really believing it, because moving into Aquarius energy, that's very connected to youth. And so youth in terms of, we're going to have people in future, the young people who aren't going to be top down leaders in the sense that we've had top down leaders in the past. They're going to be visionaries, innovators, and people will gather around them as if they're sort of team leaders, really. But for us, we are moving into a time where there are going to be many anti-aging technologies and products which are natural, that can help enormously with our health and reverse our aging. So, and believe that. But you believe that is happening, because if you believe it, you will attract the products and technologies that you need.
Yes. I mean, at a fundamental level, I totally agree with you. But at a fundamental level, there is a part of me that says we should be able to create all of our own healing and
Yep,
youthing without
yep,
help.
yep.
But from my metaphysical studies, what I understand is that if the efficiency of our DNA was very, very high, let's say Christ consciousness, we could do that. But the efficiency of our DNA at our current point in evolution is not like that. This is the 90% or 95% the scientists call junk. How can we have junk in our bodies, let alone our DNA? So I believe that as we activate our consciousness, we activate more of the ability to use our DNA, and that again enhances our ability to manifest and to create good health. But until then, we do need support. We do need to take it from every direction that we can get. And my equivalent of your affirmations is I am ageless, timeless, youthing. So,
Yeah,
and I know other people say, I'm only going to age one in every 3 years. So there are a million and one different permutations on a theme. But it is important to invoke that and not accept the programming from society that we only live X amount of time and we should expect ABC illnesses at these different
I
points in
totally,
the.
I totally agree. There's a kind of mass hypnosis about aging, that we'll degenerate, bits fall off, you get sick. There's a mass hypnosis, and I'm just not accepting that. I am
No, me neither.
absolutely not accepting. If you look at the Okinawa tribe and many indigenous tribes, they live for well over 100 years, 150 years. That's where we're headed. But we have to get mastery of our whole biological system, really. And our DNA, what they call junk DNA, is coming back online because it's been stimulated by the photonic waves of light that are coming in. They are activating or even reactivating those dormant strands of DNA, and that jumps us to a much higher state of being.
Yeah, because I think that's our multidimensional DNA. I think that
Yeah,
actually connects us to the all that there is, so we're then able to use so much more than is in our limited dimensionality right now.
absolutely, 100%. Yeah, 100%, and it's going to happen in leaps and bounds.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's what I believe too. Right. Next subject I wanted to talk about was Yeah, actually, the process, let's go back to the process of manifestation. So we're talking about now manifesting whatever we want in life, the right work, the right relationships, success in our chosen endeavors, and so on. Now, we talked about thought, we talked about emotion as the power behind the thought. So for me, when I think about how have I manifested different things in the past, well, I've had various projects, like the first business I had in London for 20 years, a project I'm currently manifesting at the moment. My book was a project. And all of these started in my imagination. And in fact, they started as a tiny seed of an idea that seemed very uninteresting. But somehow, as I embellished it, spent more time thinking about it, then really sort of started to fantasize about, so that it got to the point that it became my alternative reality almost. That was the point that then, with the emotion, the energy of balance and heart energy, I believe what happens then is you send it out, you shoot it out into the cosmos. It's like a giant antennae that's in the field of potentials, the field of all the potentials that there are. And then, as long as you can keep um, your balance then connects you to your instinct. Your instinct is then your best guidance mechanism in life. And that leads you to the synchronicities from this infinite field of possibilities that eventually leads to the manifestation in the right moment in time. So that's sort of how I see it. What do you
Yeah,
think?
yeah. I just think you set a clear intention that XYZ is already happening, and you step into that straight away and live it. You'd never put it in the future tense because you're always chasing it. You put it in the present tense. This is already easily happening to me. An example I had quite some years ago was I wanted to buy a small house in France. I'd always wanted to do that, and my mother left me a small inheritance. And I said, right, I'm locking on to that. I want it somewhere beautiful in the mountains, quite remote, quite rural. And the next day, I saw an ad for a development on the edge of a 10th century village. So I called up the sales lady, and she said, "Well, there's only one house left off plan. You'll have to fly down tomorrow if you want it." And I was already planning. I was walking in the mountains, hiking in the mountains, watching the sunsets, sipping French wine, having French food. I was already there. I was already living it. And I got there, and people know this from a video I put out some months ago. But I just stepped onto that field and looked out at the mountains and said that, absolutely, I've got to. I mean, it must have been the easiest sale the guy'd ever had, but this is it. So within 2 days, I put down the deposit on a house in France, and way up in the mountains, and an area I didn't think I knew, but I'd actually lived in 800 years before on
Wow.
exactly that piece of land, because I'd already stepped into that energy of I am already living it. So I think that's what you've got to do. And that's where the fantasy, the imagination becomes so powerful, because you embellish it. A few months ago, I put out a video called Ghosts in the Theatre that people seem to really understand. And it was what I said was, imagine you're going to the theatre one night, and there are two plays that are going to happen at the theatre that night. And they have kind of promos, if you like, for each of the plays. And one play is quite dark and sinister, and it doesn't end well. And you see the promo for that as ghostly thought forms, almost walking across the stage, moving across the stage, that haven't yet taken form, but that's the kind of dark, scary play. But equally that night, they also have a joyful play full of love, laughter, and that ends beautifully. And equally, those thought forms are moving across the stage. And it's only when you turn the spotlight on to one of those potential plays, because your focus is your food in the quantum realm, that one of those plays starts to take form and color and develop a narrative and acts out the play. And that's exactly what's happening in the quantum world. It starts as a wispy potential thought form. So people seem to find that analogy quite helpful. So the imagination and the fantasy are a crucial part, because you're using your right brain and magnetizing that frequency in, because whatever you're going to experience has to be a frequency match. If you turn your radio dial to hard rock, you're only going to get hard rock music. You turn it to classical, you're only going to get classical music. It's just a frequency match.
Mm. It's
So
that's a beautiful way of putting it. It makes it so clear. And it goes back to, again, one of these sort of quantum ideas that it's almost impossible for us to get our head around. We get a sniff of it and that's as good as we get, which is that outside of our limited dimensionality, from what I understand, everything is in the eternal now. So time is circular. So once we have energized that creation, it already exists. It's just that
yeah,
because we're in limited dimensionality, it isn't in our reality in that moment in time, but
yeah,
it is in existence.
yeah,
And if we doubt it's coming because of the timing factor and the whole synchronicity chain that has to be created, if we doubt it, then actually we close that whole door to it happening.
yeah.
So this is again why we have to stay really, really balanced and just know it's there, because otherwise we create it and then we stop ourselves being able to access it.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I was talking about some of this yesterday because I was talking about manifestation because I've described Masaru Emoto's work. Everybody's very familiar with that, and we accept that. It's been validated by many people. So we are forming crystalline structures in the water all of the time in our cells and our body. Equally, that is exactly what we're doing in the plasma. And plasma forms 99% of the universe: sun, moon, planets, you, me, tables, chairs. We think it's just air and it's inert, and it isn't. It's plasma. And plasma has quantum intelligence. So we're interacting not with just air, but with plasma, nanoparticles of electromagnetically charged tiny pieces of dust. And many people I know whose spiritual judgment I trust, they can actually see if somebody is very positive and they, love, joy, peace, etc. They're creating, just like the water crystals, beautiful symmetrical coherent geometry in the plasma. If somebody then starts to have doubts, they can watch how that geometry starts to distort and unravel. So that is potentially our energetic architecture for what we are ultimately going to experience as our new reality or matter or event or whatever. This gets very exciting because it starts to put a science to, you get what you think about all day long, or the universe is just a mirror. It's starting to put some scientific validation to those phrases.
Yeah,
And so if we
yeah.
can imagine that all day long, unconsciously, we are creating geometry in the plasma, I think we can be, that helps us to become more conscious and more masterful of how we're running our lives day to day. Because often you say set an intention or focus is really important. People think, well, it's just air out there. How's that going to make any difference? But if you explain it in terms of the geometry in the plasma, and it forms literally crystalline structures of geometry, which are exquisite, and they're millions of miles, like light lit up cobwebs of information, of filaments that communicate across galaxies within this plasma that come from our thoughts and our emotions. I mean, it's just awesome.
Yeah, and everyone, well, not everyone, but many people have had specific experiences of this, but it's just, poo-pooed, or it's not really registered, where you think of somebody and you bump into them, or they email you, or they phone you, or you are connected with somebody who's on the other side of the planet at a moment that something happens, and so because of your connection with that person. How is that possible? It's the same thing with electrical fields. Just because you can't see them, it doesn't mean they don't exist. We know they exist,
Mm.
so I think you have to start joining the dots in your own life and actually thinking about these things in a different way. And it takes us beautifully back to the where we started, which is you have to be careful what you think. And as you said, there's so much now that's being shown to be absolutely proven in science, and what isn't already will at some point in the future, because at the end of the day, spirituality is physics. It's as simple as that, as far as
Yeah,
I'm concerned.
yeah,
It's just
absolutely, totally.
some is unproven, and that's it. But we don't have to have it all proven to experience it. We can be applying it to our lives and finding out for ourselves that it works.
Yeah, and what you're really talking about, Fiona, is quantum entanglement. So, for instance, if there's a lot of bad news coming through your television and you are engaging at that level of fear, you are quantum entangling your future with those potentialities. However, if you are staying in love, in gratitude, etc., you are quantum entangling those emotions with a much different, much higher timeline. It's all about quantum entanglement. So we're back to laws of physics really with quantum mechanics, and I'm so aware of that in my life. I'm so aware that we have mastery. It's almost like being in a I said this again yesterday, it's almost like being in an old house and one person can see the ghost and the other can't. We're in the same space but we're on a different frequency, so we have to be so aware of where we are putting our focus and attention, because that is actually the driver of everything in our reality going forwards. Focus,
Yeah.
food for whatever you're giving your attention to.
Yeah. Right, so that leads us beautifully into the next subject that I wanted to discuss, which is this idea of helping others and the planet using the power of thought, what some people have called compassionate action. So this entanglement, this the amplification of one's own energy by virtue of being in a group of like-minded people. I mean, again, there's a huge amount of evidence out there now, so many different projects that have been done that show it absolutely. Like, for instance, the wave of compassion that swept the planet on the death of Princess Di, the Japanese tsunami, the Twin Towers,
Yeah,
which was logged by NASA in terms of changes to the magnetic field, a spike to the magnetic field that the satellites picked up. And then
yeah,
you've got the heart math random number generators.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Lynn McTaggart's work.
Yes, absolutely. And when we come together in a like-minded group, that energy is magnified. And so what is important, I think, is to constantly, through your day, whatever you're doing when you're setting intention, is always to think of the heart. When I'm enjoying a delicious breakfast of oats and fruit in the morning, I'm very grateful for it, but I'm also saying I intend that all beings also have delicious breakfast across the world, which sounds like a ridiculous phrase, but I want this for the betterment of all, not just for myself. And the Aquarius energy is all about putting it back to the collective. And also, what's very important, again, I was talking about this yesterday, is the awareness of being an energetic activist. Because simply by your state of being, if you're in a good, positive place, you are positively infecting the collective with that energy. And this actually, several thought leaders talk about this, that it only takes 1% to 2% of the population at a high frequency to benefit the collective. But it's ultimately, again, down to a law of physics of downward causation, which comes from chaos theory, that a small number of people operating in love, in joy, and gratitude have a massively potent effect on the collective, because high frequency energy is much more powerful than lower, rather than the other way around. So being an energetic activist, because people will often say, oh, you're just sitting on your sofa meditating, why aren't you out there with a placard? Because I am actually benefiting the collective by my state of being. And so in all my videos, I try to really get myself in a good state of being, because actually it isn't so much the content of what I'm saying, all the squares and trines and geometry and blah, blah, blah. It is an energy exchange between myself and my viewers.
It's the third language.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an
Yeah.
energy exchange, and I'm becoming more and more aware of that I could be talking Donald Duck language, but if I'm in a good place, I'm still benefiting people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why I feel in service at this time.
Yes, well, all fantastic points. And I would just go back to the idea of the small amount of people who are minded to do this, making a difference to the collective. It's the analogy I would use is you strike a match in a dark place, and the amount of light that comes off that match is exponential compared to the volume of darkness. So
Yeah.
it doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take a lot. But just again, sort of extrapolating into something that's practical for people who are watching. One, managing your own balance, your own thoughts, your own vibe as often as you can, 10, 20, 30, hundreds of times a day, checking in with yourself and saying, how am I right now? How am I right now? and making changes to rectify your balance, developing a toolkit of things you can pull on if your balance goes off. Like, for instance, you distract yourself from a poor thought into a better thought. You play with your dog, you get out in nature, you develop this toolkit of things you can pull on really quickly that you don't have to think about in that moment when you're off your balance,
Yep.
so that you can stay on balance as your default for more and more of your time, of your waking hours. But also then the idea of sitting at home and sending out in a positive, in a focused way. I think we can all do 5 minutes a day where we actually get into a sort of meditative state, find our balance, and we can either be very specific or very general. We can choose a cause or an area of the world or a theme, or we can just say, I send my balance out to where it is most needed. And I do that mostly every day, because I know that without going out and holding a placard and doing all of those things, which sort of isn't me, I definitely want to be doing something. And that is one thing I can do before I do anything else that I know makes a difference.
Yes, absolutely, and I agree with all of that. And I think that's all excellent, and very much agree with the toolkit. There are things we can, instantly go to that can flip it. If something takes us down, how do we flip it really fast? Do we hug the child, hug the dog, hug the tree? Quick flip. But also, what I like to do is almost take one step back from that, and every day I decide, what is my state of being going to be today? And I will dominate my day with that chosen state of being. Let's say it's love, let's say it's joy, and I will move through my day and only give focus and attention to those things that will give me joy and love. I won't allow other stuff in. And it doesn't mean I don't know what's going on in the world. Believe me, I know a lot of what's, believe me, because people send me stuff all day, but also intuition, etc., etc. But I am choosing my state of being that's not only of highest benefit to myself, but highest benefit to all. So I won't let myself be diverted onto, look at her, all this drama and colour, isn't it? Oh, and then this other awful thing happened. Can you believe there's another awful thing? I will not let myself be diverted, because some may be real, some may not be real, and it is so easy to get off track. So I kind of stay in that bubble of, I want to determine my state of being, because then that becomes your default habit and your default frequency. And that's when I am of greater service to the world.
100%. 100%. Right. Connecting with nature. I know this is big for you. It's also big for me. How do we do it and why? So maybe you can kick off on that one.
Yeah, I mean, in Japan, they call it forest bathing, don't they? And I think they've actually measured the effect, the beneficial effect, both mentally and physically, on walking through a forest. And because it is so nurturing, nature doesn't lie. It's so grounding, it's so authentic, it's so real. And there's just something which is so reassuring about nature, that when people and circumstances let you down, nature never does. It's always, always there for you. And it's always been, and I know it has for you too, Fiona, my touchstone in life, that is so healing. And again, I was talking yesterday about, as we raise our consciousness, I believe we'll move through a forest and feel it breathe. We'll have telepathy not only with the animals, but the trees and the plants and the shrubs. And we will go back to a sense of divine oneness with nature, of divine connection, which we have lost in our modern day, often meaningless life of living in a city in a high rise and having a meaningless job. We've lost that sacred connection. But that is where we're headed, either to feel it for the first time or remember it from ancient times. And once we get that sense of divinity and sacredness and oneness, that is immensely powerful as a support system for us. That we don't feel we're exploiting nature, or nature's our enemy with climate, or all of that stuff. That we are one with it, in total harmony with it. And that's a very different state of mind and state of being.
Yeah, it's amazing. I like the idea also. of making it more real, to think of the fact that Gaia is actually our biological parent. In
Yeah.
terms of our actual biology, not our DNA particularly, but our biology, we came from Gaia. So we are connected with Gaia. Um, and also my own experience was that I was out in nature a lot doing things, sport particularly, but I didn't really observe it. I mean, yes, I noticed its beauty and so on, but mostly it was, is the weather going to be okay, otherwise it's an inconvenience. And it was only when I had the sort of rewilding experience, and I was in a situation where living in a microclimate of extreme weather, which was very bad in the winter, that I had to seriously connect to it, to second guess what was safe to do for me, the animals, where I could ride out, when I could ride, what provisions to get in and when, and so on. And that was just the start of the most profound 6 or 7 years living in this situation, where I suddenly noticed that, there was wall to wall art, natural art everywhere, the sunsets, the quality of the light of the air, um, the animals. I mean, I thought I knew what was on my land. Oh my God, I didn't, I was not the only inhabitant with a few domestic animals. It was so much bigger than that. And so you can never really own nature. You can only collaborate with nature and be a guardian of nature. And we're going to come on to the animals thing, but I started then connecting with specific things like the full moon or the beautiful pear tree that was in my garden, and actually saying, what wisdom can you give me? What do I need to know? And I had the most lovely things. I wrote a couple down. The moon, on one occasion, the full moon, I was sitting on my window seat in my bedroom at night, just ogling at the moon. And it said, when I asked it, or the information that came into my head was, be still and shine your light bright as I do, which is beautiful. And
Beautiful.
yeah, and then the old pear tree in the garden um, said, reach into the roots of your wisdom for answers.
It's beautiful. They're both really, really beautiful. But the
So
other thing on nature, Fiona, not to forget, and I'm sure you know all about this, is earthing, is grounding. Bare feet on the grass, and that is the best possible antioxidant we can take. Way better than vitamin pills, because we are instantly sucking up healing ions from the earth, IONS, from the earth, and within moments that starts to change our physiology.
mm,
It improves the viscosity of our blood, so it goes from clumpy to much more flowing. It changes a whole range of biomarkers in our blood to the positive. And I don't know if they still have it, but groundology.com, groundology.co.uk used to have side by sides of blood. They've taken a blood sample from an average person that was all kind of clumpy and unhealthy, told them to put bare feet on the grass for 45 minutes, took another blood sample, and it was unrecognizable versus the first one. But they took several other kind of physiological measures, and simply by standing on the earth for quite a short period of time, the benefits to your physiology are immense. And so we mustn't forget that direct connection to the earth that is so incredibly healing and free for all of us.
yeah, I'm a great fan of Grandology. I have a number of their products because the other, I mean, we mustn't forget, we don't connect when we're walking. We're on plastic soled shoes or
Yeah.
leather soled shoes. We are not connecting with the earth. And when we're sitting at our desk and when we're sleeping at night for the longest, time, chunk of time in our 24-hour cycle, again, we're not grounded. So I actually use their sheet on my bed, and I
Yeah.
have it grounded into, you can plug it into the, if you're in a house, you can plug it into the mains and it goes to earth.
Yeah.
As I'm living on wheels at the moment, I actually stick it out the window and I have a stake that goes into the ground. And I have a mat under my keyboard on my desk
Yeah.
as
I've got
well.
one too.
Yeah,
Snow
same one.
groundology.
I snap. Because the other aspect to it is that we're sitting in so much electricity, and I have one for my for driving. I have one in the car that grounds to the chassis of the car. Um, we're sitting in all of these electrical fields, and we are electrical. Our hearts are electrical. Our brain is electrical. One of the big reasons, from what I understand, that it's easy to get sleepy when you're driving is that you're in this soup of electricity. So
Yeah.
the using of these devices in those situations actually helps to de-static. It clears the electrical field and it helps to remove the unwanted electricity from your own energy field. So
Yeah.
I'm a great fan of all of those products for
Yeah.
those
And I
reasons.
sit with this, and I'm working a lot through the day. I just sit with this on my lap the whole time, and I put my hand on it. And so it's like I'm connecting to the earth the whole time. Shungite is brilliant for this as well. Shungite will spin the electromagnetic waves the other way to kind of neutralize them. And so I've got shungite studded all over the house.
Yeah, me too.
So yeah, because I'm very EMF sensitive. So there are lots of things you can do to really reduce the effects of that. But I
Yeah.
think we're moving into an age
We
where
are, that's another discussion, all the gadgets and what have you, and that would be interesting at some point. Anyway, just moving from nature then to our furry family and animals. And for my part, have had the most poetic and beautiful relationships with my animals that have been much bigger than, a normal sort of human pet type relationship. And I think that we just assume that cats, dogs, horses have a limited array of whinnies, meows, and woofs, and that's their total vocabulary. But actually, animals communicate through body language, and the body language is specific to their species, but also through telepathy. You mentioned this a moment ago. And once you start to understand that and you experiment with it, and I throw this out to people watching to start somewhere with your animals and experiment, it is utterly phenomenal. I've used it in so many different situations. I mean, for instance, horses that are stressed by travel. So they see their limo pull up, they know that they're going to go somewhere. And then you get the sort of projectile pooing and the whole sort of stress and sweating and God knows what. And so, what I would do is say their name, get their attention, say their name, and then the trick is you show them pictures as if they're looking out of their own eyes. So I would say their name, get their attention, and say, listen to me, watch the picture. And I would give them a picture of where they were going. If they'd been there before, I would show them as they came down the ramp what it looked like. If they hadn't been there before and they were going to show jump or do dressage or whatever it was, I would see from their eyes doing those activities. And invariably they would go,
oh,
and
it's
calm
wonderful.
down.
That's a wonderful, wonderful idea.
Yeah. So I think
Wonderful
you can
idea.
start with your animals. I used it in my training of the animals a lot as well, because especially with horses, horses learn through trial and error. They don't understand English, they learn through trial and error. And so you can then hone that partly through body language, but also through getting their attention, sending them pictures, showing them what you want them to do. And in the end, you get this beautiful poetic this channel of communication where you can almost train and ask them to do things without any words at all, without any conscious movement in your body.
It's really beautiful. No, I think that's a wonderful idea. And I also think animals are the higher species. They're here to teach us about unconditional love. And I'm sure, like you, Fiona, I've got a massive heart for animals. But more recently, I felt even more psychically attuned to animals that, I can sense their feeling in a bigger way, even than I could before, and sense their thoughts and their moods, and that's becoming much amplified. And they have so much to teach us, so much to teach us about unconditional love. And so I just think they are the higher species, and we're kind of crazy not to recognize that, really.
Yeah, and there's so much more for another time, but the whole idea of bringing your animals back, they have such short lifespans, but I do believe we can bring their souls back, and I've had this experience many times with my own animals. And yeah, I mean, and they also teach us a lot about our state of being at any one time, because their consciousness is very much in the now. So if you go to your horse and you are stressed or you're in a hurry, they're going to pick that up and
Yeah,
reflect
yeah,
back through
yeah,
their own agitation. So
yeah.
if you're open to the information, usually the animal is responding to your state of being. And so if you manage your thought, you manage your energy, you manage your vibe, you will then get the response you want. All animals, they're not programmed to behave badly. usually the bad behavior is as a result of human interaction.
Totally. Totally agree. And where I live, there are lots of wild ponies and donkeys, and people can have difficult experiences with them. But as I walk very closely to them in the morning, within a foot or so, I'll always just speak very calmly to them. Morning, ladies, how are we this morning? And tune into how I do. I
I
chat
do
away.
the same to the cows and the sheep.
Yeah. But it's the tone. It's the tone of your voice, and again, your state of being. If you're very calm, they just let you pass by. It doesn't disturb them at all. But if I was agitated or angry, I know they'd pick it up like lightning, because they're energy beings in a bigger way. They don't have word vocabulary and rationality in the way that we do. They're all about energy, emotion, and instinct. So yeah.
Yeah, and did I tell you last time the story of the polecat? Because if I
Yes.
did, I did. Oh, well, I won't bore you with it again. But I mean, suffice to say, we can then extend this connection that we can practice on our domestic animals to wild animals
Yeah.
and achieve the most extraordinary connection with wild animals that you wouldn't have thought was possible, and the trust and the understanding and again, the telepathy. So I think, with the gauntlet I throw out is start somewhere, start practicing with your own animals, because it will just so massively expand your experience and your connection, but your love for your animals as well. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and it expands your heart.
yeah.
It expands your heart, and those wonderful feelings of compassion and joy and unconditional love yourself. So we have so much to learn.
Right, I think we're sort of getting pretty much to the end. I just wanted to mention a couple of other quickies where we can use the power of thought to get some quick wins in terms of stretching time, in terms of creating our own safety, in terms of making sure that we get the right amount of rejuvenation from very limited hours of sleep, for instance. And on that one, I mean, I must have survived on 5 hours or less for 20 years or so while I was sort of doing the London stint. But, was always on top form, because every night before I went to bed, I would say, I am going to get the perfect amount of rest and rejuvenation from the amount of time I have available for sleeping.
Yep. It's all
So
about, we are so much more powerful than we realize, and using intentions in that way. Like you, Fiona, I've always worked in a situation where there was too much volume. Now I get tsunamis of emails, about 1,500 emails a day before I start my day's work.
oh
But
my goodness.
one of my mantras, if you like, is I have all the time in the world to complete these tasks. I have all the time in the world, and that kind of takes the stress out of this massive weight of stuff that I've got to get through every day, and that's 7 days a week.
Yeah, it's make the time fit the task. This idea that time is not finite, time is actually something that you can manipulate.
Yep.
Whether it's getting to the station on time, or whether it's completing your tasks in the day, what's important, getting that done.
Yep.
I think it's about intentionally manipulating time to suit whatever objectives.
Particularly
Um,
if time doesn't actually exist.
yeah, yeah, and we've
It's a
had this.
whole other discussion.
Well, that is, and we've had this constant sort of feeling for years. I mean, all my life, really, of time speeding up, which is partly down to communications, but I think it's other stuff as well, which you'd obviously be able to explain astrologically. But there is this concept that time is not a fixed thing.
Agree, totally.
Yeah, yeah. Then also the thing about leveraging the value of food you eat by blessing it, by actually saying I say something like, I welcome you to my biology and I raise you to my highest vibration. And I know
Yeah,
that way I'm going to get
beautiful. I
more
mean,
out
look
of
at the
it.
Mesmer water crystals as an
Yes.
example of how your emotion actually changes the form of water, changes the crystalline structure of water. So
Yeah.
equally, that happens with food.
Yeah.
So that's a wonderful thing to do. It increases the nutritional value, I believe, of food.
I think so. And I've also used it for sport because I've done so much training in my life. And you have this balance always between killing yourself, putting too much wear and tear on your body in training, and not saving it for competition. So I dowse with a pendulum. I've used a pendulum as my instinct on the end of a piece of string that I can see for 30, 40 years. But also I've said at each training session, I'm going to get twice the benefit or 3 times the benefit or 4 times the benefit. So I've actually managed to do what I've done on very much less physical training than I probably should have in order to save my body.
Yeah, it's all mastery, isn't it? It's all
Yeah,
mastery of
yeah,
our being.
yeah. So, really, concluding thoughts from my perspective, I think we've talked about the evolution in human consciousness. And as more people learn to use their innate power, they're not only going to see changes in their own life, but I think we're going to see massive increase in the pace of change in the world around us. Um, and also, I think many people are beginning to realize that delegating responsibility for our well-being to external influences is not a good idea. It never was a good idea. The net effect of that is that we simply give our power to a third party. And now
100%.
is the time to take our power back. So that's, yeah.
100%, particularly with Pluto moving into Aquarius.
Mm,
The
yeah.
power shifts back from vertical top-down structures to the people.
Yeah.
And so this is our big opportunity with astrological help, if you like, to do that.
Wonderful. Pam, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Absolute joy, Fiona, to spend time with you.
Thank
Very
you.
rich discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.